Angron, don't hit me again. Don't hit me again, Angron. Perfect Fulgrim. I'm trying to be perfect for you, my Primarch. Daddy? I can't down my anti-stealth. Or Corvus Corax. Garo, don't attack again. Don't attack. No. No.
I am the best. I am the best swordsman. Ha! I am the best swordsman.
Hello and welcome to the show. I am your humble host LCFR, and today you're going on a walk with me down memory lane. We're going to take a look at the last 4 seasons for me, which have been very successful and very competitive. And we're going to get into the decks that I've run, the tips and tricks that I've picked up along the way, and what wisdom I have to share with you if you're a competitive-minded player looking to get the most from your game. Enjoy. Like most of you, I started off my Legion's career with a Loken deck, simple starter deck, and I just bought up Sons of Horus crates because I'm a big Black Legion fan. And Sons of Horus obviously is, I guess, sort of the closest thing you can get to it. You know, like I had dreams of running Abaddon, and I just wanted to kind of jump into the flavor of it. But as I got more into the gameplay, I found that I was just missing too many cards from my Legion card pool to run anything really effective and really strong. So while I finished my first season, maybe in the top 200, I think I got the little blurb that says like, you finished within 1%, or something like that. But it definitely was not a top 50 finish as far as I recall. And it was basically this kind of grueling grind of just running my faces into walls just to kind of figure out the game, get to know sort of the meta and what I can expect from different legions and warlords. You know how many times I've built up a board on 5 energy just to walk into my opponent Death Guard's endurance. It's taken a lot of bloody noses to sort of figure out what's smart gameplay in a given context. But I did get a lot of success with even a basic Sons of Horus starter deck. This deck uses a combination of fairly accessible common and uncommon cards in the Sons of Horus and Neutrals collection, and then obviously we've lucked out with a legendary or two. If you don't have all the cards in this deck, that's okay. There's a lot of cards that can be changed out for close equivalents, and you can make do with some of these big awesome tanks even if you don't have big legendary Astartes. But Loken's really just the beginning of our journey. But Tarik's done well for me, and I've had fun with Abaddon as well, because I just started focusing on collecting a full Suns card pool if I could. And I got lucky and cracked Malagurst. And I bought Vengeful Spirit someday in November maybe, or December, I don't know. But it was the same day that Tarik got a slight nerf that kind of made him not the hottest ever anymore in High Terra. But hot or not, I was just going to do it anyways. This is what the deck looks like these days. I don't take it out too often, but it's fairly reliable and has a pretty proven track record with me. This is where you want to build a Sons of Horus collection to, because if you have these Sons of Horus cards, they're going to be good more or less in any Sons of Horus warlord. Take your pick. And this Tarik deck is really just a precursor to sort of the final form in the Pokemon evolution chain of Sons of Horus, which is Horus himself. Well, look at that. Sunshine. Time passes strangely in the warp indeed. Once Tarik got his changes, and I found that I had been collecting a set for a Warlord that was no longer quite top tier, I played him for about as long as I could, and he was my best deck for some time. But I slowly but surely began to start collecting in my second biggest collection. Now that I had basically completed a Sons of Horus set, not fully completely, but you know, enough of the playable cards that I wasn't too concerned about having to buy more. You know, if I had to buy a second copy of an uncommon or an epic card, I could wait. I didn't need to keep buying crates. I'm not going to go fishing in a crate for just one or two cards that I'm missing. So I found that my next biggest collection was Emperor's Children, and I just thought I would have a go at it. This is something approximating my first iteration of Lucius. This was sort of what the deck looked like after a decent amount of play testing, trying all kinds of different Emperor's Children cards that I had access to. And this was what would become sort of the skeleton of my future Lucius decks, because I found that the level of aggression I was able to put out mostly just caught a lot of people by surprise and would close out games quickly, even without Pride of the Emperor at the time. This was December. At that time, as you can tell from my nightmares, the big nemesis for me was Angron. And it was just this nightmare auto-loss matchup that it was such a popular Warlord and Lucius could just never beat him. So I kind of only got to a certain point, you know, before it just began to give. But things got a lot better because one day, Pride of the Emperor went on sale, and then one day, Ambassador Melgator showed up in a crate, and suddenly the win rate perked up a little bit. And we had another tool to help us close out hard-fought games with Angron, where before we would be left floundering with maybe a 10 health difference. So Lucius broke into the top 50, and I think he did as well as top 20. Now it was December, and I'd had the good fortune of being recruited into Excalibur, competing in an internal tournament for the Lodge, and coming out in a top position so that I was eligible to play on the Lodge War team. And if you don't know, the Lodge War tournament is a team tournament hosted amongst about 16 or so lodges with 3 players a team. And the winning team is all entitled to a Primarch of their choice. Guess which one I picked? This was a play on Lucius's base build, but just with more removal to compensate for Fulgrim's inability to kill everything, as Lucius does, and playing a little bit more on the high end because I have fun with expensive cool cards sometimes. So we took Lodge Wars 1 down, which was great. I ran Tarik and Lucius in that tournament, and since I had a virtually complete Emperor's Children collection, I asked for Fulgrim. And Fulgrim was awarded to me just around the end of December, and I did that final couple hundred points push with a Primarch, and the power difference was incredible. You know, it was like it was divine, sublime, perfect. You know, a Primarch with 40 health, with high initiative, a full card set, and known powerful deck archetypes. It was crazy. I wasn't playing Changers, which had started to take on then, but I had a viable Fulgrim deck, and I was able at the last minute to take my position from 20th to 5th in maybe the last couple days of the season. January was the first month that I applied some rules to the ladder. I decided that it would make most sense to start the season with an aggro Warlord, so I stuck with Lucius since I had a tried, tested, and true deck build. And I would take Lucius about as high as I could take him until his win rate started to peter out, because Corvus, Angron, and Fulgrim were still all very popular, and none of them are good matchups for him. But I would take him as high as he could go until he hit Corvus, Angron, Fulgrim City, and then I would switch to Fulgrim and round out the season with Fulgrim. And that's what I did in January, and it worked out quite well. When February rolled around, while I was improving the Lucius deck and slowly but surely trying to collect other Legion card pools, I basically embraced the strongest Fulgrim deck archetype possible, an archetype called Changers, which was very, very capable of 90% plus win rates. And because the game had been rewarding me kind of randomly with a lot of good Salamanders cards, I kept my eye out in the shop and started to prioritize making Salamanders purchases. Which came at a great time because the faction enjoyed a little bit of a buff at some point in February, and myself and a bunch of folks from Excalibur Lodge decided we would try and put Vulkan to the test, and we were quite pleased with them. I wanted to make the most of the highest health in the game, and so the deck basically plays with a lot of movement from Vulkan. When he's not generating teachings, he's bashing enemy Warlord face or removing troops, and eventually he's closing games out with the Lernia Hydra, Yuria the Seducer, or ideally, the best games are with Dawnbreaker, and you just go to town hammer time. But February was overall a very mixed bag in terms of the meta. You had Corvus Corax and Fulgrim still running around. Angron had become a little less prevalent because some of the really highest level Angron players just became a bit less active. And I started to mix it up as my collection expanded, and I started to play Raven Guard as well. And I was in a great place to play Corvus Corax because arguably Excalibur Lodge has been for a long time host to one of the strongest players in the game, Havoc, who put Corvus Corax on the map as far as I'm concerned and was able to pass down a lot of his wisdom to me. And overall just improve my play a metric ton. The deck basically chips away piecemeal at the enemy while controlling the board and finishing off with usually Umbra Secundus followed by a Dark Fury or Katie's Nex, or you've chipped them away so much that you can finish them off with some little troops. But pacing was what the lesson was playing this deck, because the results were wildly different from games where I played aggressively the first two turns versus games where I was more reserved with my hands, just content to deal 1 damage directly from Corvus. And the lesson for me at that time was that every Warlord has a bit of a different pacing to get them to victory, and the deck build matters to that as well. So if you're playing a deck that's requiring you to lean back, for example, well, leaning forward and being more aggressive may not be the best route to get you to victory. So we've enjoyed a little trip down LCFR's memory lane, and maybe some of you were there for it with me. Some Angron player out there bloodying my nose over and over again. It gets better, don't worry. But now that we've done a couple seasons in review, I thought that I would go into the list that I ran almost exclusively in March. Almost 100% of my playtime on the ladder in March was with the list I'm about to show you now. And I'm going to go into a little bit more analysis with it. If you want to see live games with it, there's tons of live streams archived in the live stream playlist. You can watch the deck in action there, and often I'll have commentary. This was what brought me to second to the gates of the Golden Throne itself in the month of March. And it's a deck I'm very, very happy with. I'm happy to share it with you, and I hope it can show you as much success as it showed me. The deck's idea is to keep forward pressure and keep tempo at all times by making the most of Lucius's Warlord ability, which we've analyzed in a tutorial before, but it can't be stressed enough that this ability is your main source of removal of enemy troops and is probably going to be responsible for at least half of the damage that you'll put on the enemy Warlord. So mastering this deck is really just a question of how you budget your Warlord's health, how you budget Lucius's health as he goes to battle, attempting to not only kill every living thing that lands on the enemy board, but the enemy Warlord as well. Let's take a look at some of the key tactics that make the deck tick. And we have to start with Tactical Brilliance, which is really the preeminent Emperor's Children tactic. I would recommend you put it in all your Emperor's Children decks. it will allow you to do something many other factions cannot, which is manipulate energy and cram more play into a single turn than you would otherwise be able to. And being able to essentially increase your turn by 2 energy can be completely devastating, and in the early game can snowball right away. And some of the biggest game-winning benefactors of this are Firewalkers, which you can drop as early as turn 2 and get a buff from, and Agnamen, which can show up on turn 3. I also recommend most decks play some form of card draw, either Lectitio Divinitatis or Abandoned Supplies. They are the most common ones. And if you're feeling spicy, you can try out Void Engagement as well. I think it's a lateral shift, but just as good. Lectitio is really there to be played on odd numbered turns to let you trigger perfection of your troops or tactics a little easier. If you have a line of play over a series of turns, or even over the next 2 turns, you don't need to play Lectitio. It can just wait, and I have games where I'll mulligan it from a starting hand, I'll draw into it later, and I'll never play it because I have a lineup of things I want to do. This is a beautiful buff effect that requires precise timing to really make the most of it. You will find you'll win and lose some games alike if you hold it for too long, and its best use, if you don't believe you have a high toughness troop you're going to have to kill soon, is to use it when you've got 2 or 3 troops accompanying Lucius, just to get the most of a big buff, especially if the attack will bring the enemy warlord to equal health or lower than your health. One of the strongest but trickiest cards in the Emperor's Children set. I recommend experimenting with this to be able to better find the right moments to play it. I don't often keep this card in a starting hand just because it's a little bit clunky, and I never really know when I'm going to play it. It's not super easy to plan around because opponents know you run it, and they'll be removing your troops ruthlessly to stop you from creating an army of jacked perfect guys. I've analyzed this card before. This is your second Pride of the Emperor. This is Lucius's card more than any other Emperor's Children Warlord. This is a card that, as the game gets later, will allow you to buff yourself to incredible heights, or basically be able to bust out awesome high damage moves. Don't be too focused on the perfection caveat. You won't often score perfection, nor should you try and hold at all costs in your hand, hoping to trigger perfection. It's not a card I like to keep in my opening hand, but it is a card that I will hold for 6 energy or later to basically create super turns. Even some turns where I'm just using it to get a buff, reload, play an Agnamen on 6 energy, that's value. These are the workhorse troops of the deck. Misaelis Jet Bikes and Idaken Squad are going to achieve a lot for you, especially if you're able to master the timing. If you have both in your hand, which is fairly common, it's often an issue of which one do you play first. Most scenarios I find it's better to stun the enemy warlord, have a 3/3 on the troop who can only be removed by cards in their hand, and then this will help you build up a board. But there's also occasions where it's better to just come right out of the gate swinging with 5 damage. If you don't have both in your hand, I usually recommend playing whichever one you do have on curve. It'll help put you ahead damage-wise, or will offer handy stun and maybe removal. And I always try and play these troops perfectly. But don't sabotage later plays out of fear of playing them imperfectly. It's okay to be imperfect scum.
It's a beautiful day up here in the sky.
Seize the moment. You can always seize the moment with Battle Honor. You'll learn from getting that broken nose when to lean back and when not to. Just experiment, but don't be afraid to kill enemy troops that are just going to hit you anyways. Yeah, I'm flying. I'm a pretty frequent flyer on Discord. You need help and you're playing Lucius, drop me a line. I'm a friendly cat.
And welcome back. I hope you enjoyed that little trip down memory lane as much as I enjoyed plumbing the depths of my nightmare and memory. In parting, I just had a few final remarks on the winning attitude, not just the winning methods. The winning attitude is gracious in victory and defeat. The winning attitude puts the onus on losses on themselves first, before they blame their opponent, who obviously must be a smarter cat than us if they beat us, or blame luck. We want to control what's within our power. Luck, what our opponent does with their own brain and finger swiping, nothing to do with us. So focus on what you can do to improve your play. And to all my fellow traders across the galaxy, whether you're fighting on Calth, Prospero, Mars, or at the very gates of the Imperial Palace itself, remember, death to the false emperor. Victory will be ours. But be good to one another in real life, okay?
Well, that's another slash on my face. Thanks for tuning into the Best Swordsman series. Catch you on the ladder.